Welcome to the Twinkl Talks EYFS podcast. Working in the early years is busy, funny, messy, and exhausting. Join me, Shana, some of the Twinkl EYFS team, special guest speakers, and other early years practitioners as we talk honestly about our experiences. Whether you're listening for CPD, on your commute, or to help you relax, Twinkl EYFS will share everything you need to know about all things early years.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Twinkl Talks EYFS, where we talk about your private early years problems. My name's Katie.
And I'm Charlotte.
And the first question we're going to talk about today that we've had come in is, how do I stand out in my CV when applying for jobs in private early years settings? So Charlotte, what would your first bit of advice be for a stunning CV in early years?
I would say to tailor your CV to the role. Or tailor the CV to the setting itself,
Hmm.
because then I think it shows that you've looked at the setting. Like, say they're like a forest school or a Montessori sort of setting,
Hmm.
you could add little bits into your CV that link to their approach or the way they do things, and you're more likely,
Very good point.
if you really want to get into maybe a Montessori nursery.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's sort of a what's the word?
Generic.
Generic nursery, you can sort of use your CV to apply for a few. But if it's maybe a specific one that's quite uses a certain approach, or they've got a forest school at the back and they're very into like outdoor play and things like that,
Yeah.
you could maybe add some experiences in there, or maybe some qualifications you might have that they might really like. Tailor it to the job itself.
I completely agree. That personalization element is so important. And you can do it from so many different aspects. You can look up their social media pages, see that they might do a lot of tough trade activities, or see that they have a really exciting construction area in their garden, and make sure to mention those bits related to your experience. So you could say, in my setting, I helped set up the construction area and we did XYZ, which helped the children do ABC. And that nursery would be like, wow, we've actually got something like that that would be great for. And the same way that you can look at Ofsted reports as well, and not necessarily be like, I saw your recent Ofsted was requires improvement, so you need me. It would be more like, you notice that on their Ofsted report they talk about, for example, they need to work on early reading with children. I would then, in the cover letter or on my CV, say that I'm potentially a specialist in early reading, and or that's something I really enjoy or spend a lot of time focusing on. I also think that when it comes to, if you're sending in a CV, make it look jazzy, because everyone else is just sending in blocks of text, this black text on white paper, and you don't stick out. I'm not saying have a pink background, but add a little bit of colour, like make it interesting to look at, and yours will get the eye immediately when people are flicking through. I think that will really help bring attention to you as well.
Yeah, I think when you add that bit of a personal touch, you stand out from the rest. Like you said, it doesn't have to be anything extravagant, but that little bit of extra thought and effort that they can see that they've really put a lot of time and work into this, and it's not just been rushed and thrown together and you've just applied for it off like a whim. But you've actually looked into what this setting's about, like the job role, the job description on the
Yeah.
job offer and things like that. And yeah, I just think, and sometimes if there's like a cover letter, because some jobs now you have to do a cover letter, don't you? Make sure that is done to the best that you possibly can, because a lot of job people will look at that first before your actual CV.
And I think it's harder to stand out if you have to fill out an application form, right? Because you can't make an application form look pretty. You can't add in necessarily your own personal touches. But that's where, if you're given the chance to answer a set of specific questions, or they ask you to write your experience, that's where you do jazz it up as much as you can to be super memorable. Because at the end of the day, these people are looking, literally, it could be just 10 CVs or it could be 100 CVs. If you don't stick out, you're not going to be memorable. And just saying that you're level 3 qualified isn't going to be enough. Like, why do you fit that setting? What is so special about you compared to me, assuming we went for the same job? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you've got to showcase as much of you and your
Which is hard to
personality
do
as you
written
can.
down.
Yeah, it is. But I feel like if you sort of, I know it's hard to say put all this time and effort into a CV, because a lot of people are just pushing CV out, and there's loads of jobs that they're applying for. But I think if it's a specific job that you really want to do and you think you're going to be really good at
Yeah, you've got to put the effort
it, you've
in.
got to put the effort in, and it may take you a few hours, but it'll be so worth it in the end when you get an interview, and then you can showcase more of who you are when you get that opportunity. So another topic we've seen on social media is around tough trays, and are tough trays becoming a thing of just for showing the early years to post on social media, or should it be, people losing the point of them being to do with the children's learning and not just something that's like to look at?
I think that is such a juicy and potentially controversial question because I love looking at activities online. It's so much easier to see something presented to you as a photograph of a tough tray setup, for example, as opposed to just reading something. You can't envision it, so you need the picture. But I do sometimes see an activity and I'm like, who was that set up for? Was that set up for Instagram or was it set up for the children? Because it would have taken you probably 30 to 60 minutes to set that up, but they're going to destroy it after 2 minutes. And these pretty little touches you added aren't actually adding any learning purpose. Do you know what I mean? I think sometimes, I'm not saying everyone does, but I do think that happens a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think I really like tough trays when they're used properly.
Hmm.
Not saying that a lot of people don't use them properly, but
For sure.
like I think they're really nice for like hands-on experiences and sensory learning and child-led kind of activities. But I do think sometimes, because you want things to look nice, don't you? You want them to look appealing for the children. You want them to be like, "Ooh, what's that?" And like it invites them over to play with it, which I understand. But then you do think sometimes, you know, the learning part of it gets overlooked,
For sure.
and you start to be like, oh, I'll add this because it looks really pretty. But then you think, well, if you add that, are the children even going to play with it? Are they even going to get anything out of it? Like, do you really need to add that to the stuff tray?
There's a limit between setting something up for the children because it looks pretty. So then is that then only suitable for that very specific purpose? So if you set up, for example, a winter wonderland and it's got, I'm struggling to come up with an example now, but say you've put out some corn flour, some foil, a couple of sugar cubes, whatever you would do for your little winter wonderland. Have you then left enough space for the children to be creative within that themselves, or can it only be used as that winter wonderland? Because you want children to be able to come over and be going, oh, actually, we could turn this into a beach, or we can start building our own castle with those sugar cubes you've used and then use the other toys to knock it down. Like, are you given, is there open opportunity for them to explore their own interests? Can they put their own spin on it? Otherwise, it is quite limited, but that does also have a place in early years. If you're wanting to develop a very specific set of skills, of course, you're going to set up a very specific tough tray to develop fine motor skills, for example. So they both have their place. It just depends. And I think my slightly controversial opinion here is when you see these tough trays that you're looking at online and you're like, what is the purpose here? I think they're just maybe sometimes coming from a place where they don't have the in-depth understanding of child development that we would do as experienced early years practitioners. Some parent accounts that I follow, I think I like that, not because they are doing it for followers. Like for a lot of people, this it's content making, right? This is how they make their money. So they make it pretty because that gets them the likes. But from a child development perspective, we would look at it and be like, actually, if you put in these utensils, they would be able to develop their skills further. If you took that away, would it be a bit more open ended? So I think it depends.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a very controversial topic, and people will have lots of opinions on it. But on social media, I do see a lot of people saying, you know, tough trays are supposed to be about the learning and the development, not how it looks. But then you've got that side of it, like you said, people might want to showcase their nursery through their social media and want parents to be like, oh, look at these fantastic activities that they do. I'm going to go have a look around this nursery and book my child in there. So you can see it from the point of view of they might want to showcase their nursery off and be like, look at these wonderful activities that we do. But then you have to think about, yeah, that's great. They look lovely, but like, are the children actually benefiting from, And you don't want to be wasting your time, do you? You don't want to be spending all that time.
Time's already limited in nursery.
Yeah, and then the children don't really get anything out of it. And then obviously a lot of the time you might use it for your observations or to guide your planning further on. So it has to have a meaning, like it has to be meaningful. It can't just be, you know, as I say, the style over substance.
Such a good point about it being for some people marketing purposes though, because I was literally just thinking of like influencers and businesses, but actually you're so right. Nurseries will be using these as part of their marketing. They put it on social media for marketing purposes. Otherwise, they can just share it with parents on apps. So actually, it does need to be visually appealing because you want a parent to look at it and be like, wow, look how beautiful that is. They've worked so hard on that. I want someone to care about my child that much. That's a really good point.
And I feel like as well, a lot of nurseries now use tablets to put pictures on of what their children are doing. And some practitioners might be like, oh, I want to put a really lovely picture on for the parents to see this great activity that we've been doing. And then obviously they'll put pictures of the progress of then the children playing in it and what they've been doing. So a lot of it as well might be they want the parents to be like, oh, wow, these activities are really good. Like, look at all the effort their staff are putting in
Yeah.
to, learning, helping my child learn. So it's a whole big hole that you could open up, really, isn't it, on this topic?
Having it for learning purposes and having it for just looking good. They both have their purposes, we've discovered. Perfect. Thank you. Another early years practitioner has asked for tips about reducing stress and preventing burnout when working in the early years. And from my own experience, that's actually a really, really tricky one because part of the reason working in early years, in my experience, is so hard is because it is an emotionally and physically demanding job, and you just can't avoid that at the end of the day. If you're doing, some of us will be doing 8 till 6, 5 days a week. And if you are, you can't avoid those responsibilities. Like it's just a physically and emotionally demanding job. But I think how you take care of yourself is so important. Like you are your own responsibility. I do believe that the workplace should have things in place to be looking after you. But at the end of the day, your number one priority should be you. You can't pour from an empty cup. So you need to make sure that out of nursery, you are taking care of yourself, you are eating a healthy diet, you are exercising, you are making time for self care. And some people, self care is going to the gym. For some people, it's having a bath. And for some people, it's cleaning their house. Like, whatever that is for you, you have to prioritize that because you will burn out if you're not finding the time to care for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I used to make sure that, obviously, I'm a big gym goer. I used to make sure that I would go to the gym when possible, just as a stress relief more than anything else.
Hmm.
And I used to find as well, when you work in early years, you put a lot of pressure on yourself, and you don't mean to do it, and you don't do it to make yourself feel all this pressure, but it's like you put the pressure on yourself, and you need to sometimes set realistic expectations when you work in early years. And just think, I'm not a superhero. I cannot do everything. Like, I will have days when I don't do a lot. I might have days where I think, wow, I've been really productive. And then other days you might come in and feel really tired and you might struggle. And that's fine because, we're not at that Energizer bunny off the advert. We're not, people think when you work with children, you've got to be bouncing around all the time, which you do when you can. But I think some people just think, oh, I'm a really bad early years practitioner because I'm not up and jumping and running around today and I'm not as giving 100% as I should be. But sometimes you just can't do it, and that's okay. And you need to realise that that's okay.
This situation that you're talking about is where you want to make sure that you have a good working relationship with the people in your room. Because if me and you are working together with someone else, you want to be able to come in and be like, team, I am not feeling good today. I am so tired. I didn't sleep very well last night. And that's where your team should be like, do you know what? I am hyped. I am full of energy and I'm ready to go today. I will do the outdoor and the physical play activities. Do you want to start with some observations to warm yourself up? And then maybe you could be on the sensory play or the arts and crafts. And then you'd be like, great. And then when I come in and do the same, you'll be like, I'll do that. I'll do that activity where you need to be bouncing off the walls. And do you want to do reading time? Do you want to start sorting out a snack? Like, if you're part of a good team, you can make those compromises, which really, really helps on those harder days.
Yeah. And I think as well, you've got to remember to celebrate the small wins. So like if you do something on the day that you work in, and it's something really small, but it's something that you've achieved, and nobody else might realize that it's important to you. Celebrate it, because I think in early years there's a lot of negativity, like, oh, you didn't do this and you didn't do that. But if you do something that
It can feel that way for sure.
yeah, if you do something and you think, oh, I'm really proud of myself for that. It could be something really small, but just celebrate it, even if it's just in your own head or like to the people you work with. Be like, oh my God, look what I just did. Kind of like you celebrate the children's small wins, during the day. You can celebrate your own wins. And I used to find as well, if your space is very cluttered,
You feel cluttered
your mind's cluttered.
for sure.
So if you've got a nice decluttered shelf or your drawer is really messy, declutter it, because then it makes you feel a little bit like you've kind of got your stuff together, and
Yeah,
it makes you feel a little bit better in your mind as well. You don't feel as cluttered, if that makes sense.
definitely.
So the last question we have is, should people in senior roles, such as a room leader, have key children or not?
I think yes, but perhaps they don't have the same amount as everyone else. So if you are a deputy manager, for example, and you are also doing the same things as a room leader, but on top of that, you're also Senko or DSL, then your number of key children should reflect that. So you shouldn't necessarily be like, you have to have 32 because you're in more of a management position. I sometimes think perhaps those people should be having less, so the work that they are doing is quality instead of doing more, and then they can put that extra time and effort into their other responsibilities that the rest of the room or those on the ground floor may not have. I don't know if that's a bit controversial or if you agree.
As preschool room leader, I used to make sure I had key children, but I didn't have as much as everybody else.
Yeah,
And some people didn't like that, and they made it quite known that they didn't like that. But I used to say, I'm still part of the team. I'm still having key children. I'm doing that process, but I have a lot of responsibilities outside of the room and in the office and doing, other bits and bats. So it's really hard for me to have more, and I don't want to neglect the children that I have by having more and not give them all the support that I can because I have other jobs to do.
yeah.
But I didn't want to be like, oh, I don't give me any. I don't want any. I think I had 6 or 7.
You'll be like, I will just have one, and that's enough. I will have one child that comes in half a day a week, and that's my key child.
But I did have, because I was Senko lead, I did have a child who was under that, so I had one-to-one with him. So I was like, it's hard for me to take on any more than 6 children,
Yeah.
whereas the others would have maybe like 10, 9, 10, 11.
It's really about understanding the needs of your nursery.
It's what you feel like you can take on without the children missing out. Because yeah, you don't want to have so many children and then you feel like you can't actually spend enough time with them or look at what areas they need the support in or anything like that because you've got too much going on. 'Cause it's not fair on them.
When I was a manager of my first ever setting, I would do 50% of my time with the children, like in the room, as you know, in ratio, and the other 50% of my time out of my room doing my manager stuff. Not my, this wasn't my first setting actually, sorry. But I did eventually get to the point where I had the same amount of key children, but obviously I'm doing half of the time in the room. And I found that so difficult trying to keep up with the same expectation of people who were in the room full time or perhaps the same amount of hours as me, but they would have less. But it was expected for me to have more because I was the manager. And then on top of that, doing all of the manager bits and pieces of the day, I found that personally really difficult because it was just too much all the time. And I am a very much go, go, go person, but that was too far because there was no chance of ever catching up. Like you were always going to be a couple of steps behind. And if I knew and felt the way I did now, I would have taken a step back and been like, actually, it makes sense for you to have two or three more key children, or perhaps split that out across one extra key child per other person and me to have that less, but to be able to do a better quality across all of the areas of my job and not have lots of different things. go into pot because I couldn't focus on it.
I mean, I used to have I was quite lucky with some of the team that I used to have, because if I was out of the room, they would write notes down for me on my key children. So they'd be like, oh, they took part in this activity while you were out, and I've wrote down what they did and what they've learned if you want to use it, because you've not been in the room to, witness it. So that used to help, because then I could just type that up, and they used to take pictures for me, so I could just link the pictures. But when you're out of the room so much, you miss the children playing, don't you? You miss what they're doing, and that's
Yeah.
the hard bit as well, because they might do something and you've missed it because you're not in the room because you're doing something else that you need to be doing.
On a random thought, this is where AI could be really helpful in early years, not about it taking observations on your children, because obviously, like AI is like an assistant, but with no like brain. It will only do what you tell it to do.
Yeah.
But this is where you could save time. I'm just thinking in your limited time is where you could say to AI, child A did A, B, C. Please write me an observation explaining how this hits the EYFS and with 3 potential next key steps to focus on. You writing that sentence has saved you so much time writing the observation. And that could be put into a report as well. So you could put that into a context report, which for a lot of people, I'm sure is a bit like, AI robots are taking over. But no, just an interesting point to think about of how can AI support us in nurseries and preschools. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Twinkl Talks EYFS. If you ever want to submit your own private early years problems, you can find us on a multitude of social media platforms, including Facebook groups, Instagram, Pinterest, X. If it exists, we're probably on it. But in the meantime, we'll chat to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
So that's it for today's episode. I hope you really enjoyed it. If you would like to join in or would like to know more, then come and find us on our social media sites. We have a Facebook page, Facebook groups, an Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Pinterest, and YouTube. All the links of where to find us will be in our podcast description. Come and join the conversation. And whatever you're doing today, I hope you have a great day.